Hello to everyone who is joining. Welcome. We will start officially in a couple of moments, but while we're waiting, just want you to head over to chat and just say hello. Let us know where you're listening in from. Is it New York City? Somewhere else? Somewhere warm and sunny as we're, well, it's sunny here in New York City today, but it's not particularly warm, so we might be a little jealous, but that's okay. Share away. And thanks everyone for joining it. Oh, all the way from, well, all the way from Phoenix. Thanks, Chad. Hello from Brooklyn. I'm here in Astoria, Queens. So Brooklyn, although it's really close, sometimes seems really far away because you have to take the BQE, and that's it's just going to be traffic. It's just how it is. Welcome from Chicago. Awesome. Love Chicago. Nothing like a little Chicago blues, Chicago pizza. San Antonio. Jersey. Awesome. All right. Well, it looks like people are coming in from all kinds of localities. Well, welcome again, everyone. So officially, welcome to DMCNY's not quite midweek recharge. They're usually on Wednesdays, but we thought we'd throw a twist in this week and have it on a Thursday. And so I'm Ginger Conlon. I'm president of DMCNY, and today we are going to talk about trends in customer identity management. So before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank DMCNY's annual sponsors, whose generosity makes events like this happen. Platinum sponsor is Acxiom. We have 2 gold sponsors, Weiland and Alliant, and our bronze sponsors are Japs Olson Company and Epsilon. So thank you again to our sponsors. A bit of housekeeping. If you have any technical issues, just go ahead and mention them in the chat. If you want to chat amongst each other, amongst yourselves as the presentation is going on. If you have a question for one of our speakers, please go ahead and use the Q&A box for that. That'd be most helpful. And we will have our Q&A at the end of the presentation. So with that, I would like to welcome our moderator for this evening, DMCNY board member Vincent Pietrafesa, who is also VP of B2B products for Stirista. Take it away, Vincent.
All right. Thank you so much, Ginger. And yes, as Ginger mentioned, throw some love in the chat. Let us know that you're here. How are we doing? How am I doing? How's AJ and Chad doing? But also, as far as the Q&A portion, we're going to get to that at the end. There's some amazing questions that we have for Chad and AJ throughout the discussion. But at the end, please go right into the Q&A. It is great to be here. As Ginger mentioned, I am Vincent Pietrafesa, the Vice President of B2B Products at Stirista. But tonight, I am here more as a DMCNY board member, your moderator and host. I dressed up for this. I'm in an office. I'm screaming right now. I get it. I wore a pocket square. It's weird. I'm in New York City. I'm walking down. It was a nice day here, as Ginger mentioned. I'm walking down the street dressed up, and I was the weirdo. I was the weirdo dressed up because people really are not dressing up these days at work. But our panelists are dressed up, ladies and gentlemen. Without further ado, I'd love to welcome these 2 gentlemen. First, the Chief Executive Officer from Acxiom, Chad Engelgau. What's going on, Chad?
Hey, Vincent. Hey, AJ. Thank you, everybody, for participating today.
I love your background there. That's great. So feel free out there.
It's a wishful thinking background of the one day we can all get back together in person to do these things, and imbibe a little bit and enjoy each other's company afterwards. But it's wishful thinking in a virtual background today.
Absolutely. I love it. And then, ladies and gentlemen, the CEO of Stirista, Mr. Ajay Gupta. What's going on, AJ?
Hey, Vincent. Glad to be here after the fiasco last week, and pretty excited to have a fresh bottle of water these days. So it's
Well, exactly. And AJ is referring to, he's based in San Antonio, Texas. And we actually moved this event last week because of some of the tragic events that were happening in San Antonio. So thank you all for joining us again this week, and happy to hear. I know that your family is safe and sound. So our hearts go out to all of those people in Texas area. So thank you for joining us. Let's get into it, gentlemen. This is awesome for me. I'm glad I'm here with you, two of my favorite people in the industry. Identity, right? Everyone's kind of talking about it. Identity. I want to start with some of the layman's terms around identity, right? Identity, it's who you are, what makes me, right? What makes me, people, places, things, my age, my income, my family, income, presence of children, but interests that I have, behaviors. That's how a lot of people describe identity. My first question to you gentlemen, to you, what is identity and what does it mean for you and for your company? Let's start with Chad.
Thanks, Vincent. Great explanation. I would try to maybe just put some more specificity around it. The ability to actually recognize somebody, again, a person, a place, or a thing across name changes, location, and time, in order to interact with them is what the fundamental principles are of identity in context of marketing.
And what does that mean to your company?
So for us, our primary goal is to help businesses create identity solutions that empower fundamental use cases like customer experience initiatives, analytics reporting, greater customer engagement strategies, whether that's if they're paid, earned, or owned media. And so at the core of all marketing activities, the better you can identify individuals or businesses you want to communicate with, the better your marketing experience is going to be.
Thank you. And AJ, for you, what is identity and what does it mean to you and to Stirista?
Yes, I think in the 10 or so years that I've been with Stirista, I mean, you were still a young man, Vincent.
Yes.
But in those years, we've kind of seen things go from consumer demographic companies to list brokers. And now if you go to any of the websites, everybody is an identity company, right? So everybody is trying to embrace that word, and we're no exception because it is the cool new word. But I think it's also often overused. And from my perspective, it's really about being able to take the offline data. We've been very familiar with getting the basics right about name, address, age, gender, those sort of things, and then tying it back to an online identity. That's where I kind of see an online persona. That's where I see a true identity graph coming together. Because right now the problem is when you go to most media buying platforms, you see 200 million dentists as an audience category, right? And how do we tie that to the reality where there's only 200,000 dentists? And the fact that it is now acceptable shows me that there's a lot of room for improvement of that identity graph that we are all working towards. But I think that's where it all comes down, is tying your online, offline persona and being able to link that person together into one cohesive identity.
Thanks, AJ, and thanks for the compliment. It's a lot of product, and there's about 3 bright lights on me to make me look a little younger. But AJ, let's stay with you because you touched upon it there. But why is it important to get identity right within your enterprise?
Yeah, so I think the big challenge is, if you just kind of think about what is going on with just names, for example, right? There's different people who are using first name, middle name, or you think about LinkedIn profiles. People have B2B files, B2C files. So then you end up with kind of these different profiles of people within a database, whether you're a small company or a large company. And actually a good example for those of you who are who follow tennis, local tennis leagues, 4 tennis leagues are almost as competitive as like a soccer league in Europe. So everybody's trying to get the other person disqualified. So I entered the name of a player as Hunter Snell, and on his official name on the roster was Huntington Snell. I just never realized his name was so regal. So, you know, the other captain challenged it and said we had somebody who's not on the roster. And that's just out of 20 people in a team. And you start talking about Acxiom and Stirista, where we're tracking 250 million people, you can start to see how ID graphs can start falling apart unless you have some way of being able to correct and have a truth source to map an individual that's coming into your database to an exact, precise identifier.
Who thought tennis got so competitive at that level? That's crazy, Chad, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the failed professionals, this is the way we relive our weekends.
So Chad, same question to you. Why is it important to get identity right?
Well, I love AJ's, specificity in terms of a lot of the details that are important. I'll try to up-level it a little bit to create some comparison, but a marketer's job is to effectively and efficiently reach people, whether we're business people or we're consumers, who are more likely to purchase their product or service than somebody else. And so when you talk about the tremendous amount of money and the tremendous amount of data and technology that is applied against solving that simple statement, getting identity right is foundational to your success. As AJ pointed out, if you cannot effectively understand who is calling into your call center and what interactions they've had with you historically as a business, what products they purchased, what issues they may have already experienced, and again, whether they're interacting with you on the website, via a chat, via a call center, via email, or you, of course, are interacting with the person, again, trying to cross-sell or upsell them. If you cannot effectively identify somebody and work with a partnership ecosystem that effectively translates those identities in privacy compliant ways from your data sets into a publisher's website, you fundamentally cannot solve the initial problem that you have to have as a marketer, which is effectively and efficiently, finding people to buy your product or service. And so at the core, when you strip away the channels, social, mobile, display, OTT, video, you strip it down, right? If you cannot manage that data effectively, and you can't anchor an identity spine, and you cannot match that identity spine, and connect it efficiently into an ecosystem, you are less efficient than your competitors and less effective, which ultimately affects your business and your bottom line.
I agree. Chad and AJ, we're going to pause for 1 second. We're going to actually do our first poll. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do 1 to 2 polling questions, get you involved, right? We want to get you involved. So let's throw up the first polling question there. True or false, identity resolution and identity matching mean the same thing? We're taking it easy. This is not a multiple choice. It's only 2. There's a 50-50 chance to get this one right. So we'll just take some time to get the vote in there. So why don't we, while that's happening, well, no, I don't want to get your take on it because it would give maybe the answer away just yet. Right.
I did notice that hosts and panelists cannot vote.
I know I can't vote. I was like, oh,
vote.
It's like, thank goodness. I'm not sure I knew the answer. No, I do. I do know the answer. Only because I have the answers to the test, but that's why we have you 2 experts here, so I could learn more about it. So let's see, right? The results page. Does anyone go ahead and click?
Survey says.
Here we go. 87% of our audience said false, and 3% of our audience said true. What do you gentlemen think?
Go ahead.
Did I get it right?
Yeah, looks like everyone except those 3 people And I would have thought it was you, Vincent, but I know you could not vote either.
Yeah,
so.
I set up a separate Zoom account and was like, yeah, that's true. But it's okay. Look, that's why we're learning about this, and that's okay that people answer true. It seems like the same thing, right? A lot of people could argue Martech, Adtech, same thing. But love to hear your thoughts on that, Ajay.
Yeah, so matching is to me kind of a more of a binary option where you're saying whether or not somebody is matching to something. So it's typically a yes or a no. And whereas identity resolution is something much more complex, you're trying to assess the best possible answer from a disjointed set of data and help sort of fill in the various gaps from fragmented pieces of data.
Your thoughts, Chad?
Yeah, absolutely very similar in that identity, as Ajay pointed out at the beginning, is a term that's just being thrown around loosely. And so it can definitely be hard for individuals who aren't steeped in it and spend a majority of their time to understand the nuances or differences or compare match rates versus actual resolution. And to Ajay's point, matching is literally kind of like, think about it like go fish, right? The card is either the same card or it's not the same card in the deck. And when you think about resolution, it's really the process to take a whole bunch of disparate information and normalize and agree that it is actually associated with the same thing, whether it's the same business, the same person, the same household, the same web property, et cetera. And so that slight nuance is important to know as you go down your strategy and you talk to vendors about what you're actually comparing and contrasting when you may see a report around their match rates or their identity resolution capabilities or how they do that things that we'll talk about a little bit more today.
Well, yeah, and let's stay on that because I want to talk what is the best matching approach when configuring an identity graph. And Ajay, let's go to you there. And if you could first define a little bit further the identity graph, what that means for the audience there.
Yeah, so much like many other companies, 5 years ago, we had different types of data sets. So we had this B2B identity graph, which was really about professional life. Then we had a consumer identity graph, which was about where people live. And then we had an online graph, which was trying to track people's devices. So this is kind of an ongoing challenge for everybody right now, is how do we connect all of these different graphs together? And because of some of the challenges that we've talked about, some basic, simple stuff that makes it pretty hard to match on. We're really trying to take multiple approaches in trying to do the match. So one of the approaches we're taking is being able to really identify and tag individual households with a particular ID that's consistent. Then we have sort of some secret sauce in terms of being able to tag certain names with their various identities as well. So it's a kind of a mixture of different things that we are using. And for us, it's IP addresses, email addresses, CTV IDs. So there's a whole different set of things we're trying to collect and look at in order to resolve that identity. And obviously, it's even when matching two Stirista data sets, you don't get a perfect 100% overlap unless they just happen to be the exact same data sets, right? So, but our goal is to have a unified matching key that any data set that we bring in from any third party or first party can match to that graph at a high level. And in order to do that, it's really a mixture. It's going to be a mixture of first, second, and third party data.
Got it. Chad, same question, best matching approach.
Yeah, I think what I'll say there is use a couple stories. When you're building your identity graph and your identity solution and you're trying to stitch together, as we talked about, all the data sources that are coming in, you can think about it this way. A deterministic match within your identity solution might be associated not necessarily with the technology, but the fact that the consumer called up, we said, hi, I'm Chad Engelgau. Hey, can you please verify your account number? I pick up my bill, I read off the account number to them. They ask me what my email address is. I actually give them my email address. On the phone system itself, it does what's called a reverse lookup, or it looks at the ANI, what the telephone company is pushing through on the phone number I'm calling on. You could grab that data, and you could basically deterministically associate between the information I've given to you and the connection between the computer information that's coming in, say that all of this data is associated with Chad Engelgau, and we also know his house because that's on a bill and where we provide the service, let's say. And so you can stitch that together deterministically to say, we're highly confident that based upon the facts we've collected and their association, we have deterministically matched this data together. Now, let's say if you're also though looking at a data set for my household that might be coming, as AJ talked about, via a connected television, right? Like a Fire Stick or an Apple TV or something like that. And you know, okay, hey, well, I know this IP address is associated with the range that sits within that part of the country, or the ISP that Chad has to get internet connectivity. And we actually have a record that says that, you know, or a data provider who says this physical address is actually associated with this device. So you have a device ID and a physical address. You can probabilistically then say with a high level of confidence, hey, with this other data, we know, hey, that's Chad Engelgau's household. Now, do we really know who's watching the TV? No, you really don't know that it's Chad. You've kind of probabilistically matched some aspects of it. You've deterministically matched other aspects. But let's say you're looking at a data feed around viewing time or what advertisement was shown. You could, again, probabilistically estimate that if we know that in the household there's 2 adults and 2 children, those children are under 18, if the viewing behavior that we're talking about is between, let's say, 10 p.m. at night and 2 a.m. in the morning, more than likely, probabilistically, it's not the kids watching the TV, right? So you're actually reaching adults in the household at that point. So again, the stitching together of a deterministic match or a probabilistic match, you know, is really going to be use case driven, and they're going to be associated with the types of data you're collecting and how they're being given to you factually, or with enough data that you can deterministically connect it to another data set, or you're going to make those probabilistic estimates using algorithms and matching techniques to stitch that together to associate it with the right person, household, or individuals associated with the business or household and the behavior that you observed.
And I also want to touch upon something. I'll come to it later. You mentioned something that's also kind of another one of those hot topics, if you will, OTT and connected TV, with more people being home, currently binge watching, utilizing the television a lot more. I want to get to that later, but I want to get to another poll question before we do that, because this poll question is something that we've talked about a lot at the DMCNY, having another programming event around it as well. But it's the next poll question to my team there as they pose up. It's around cookies, right? You've been hearing all of the third-party cookie, the disappearance of cookies, right? If I have to hear about cookies one more time, right? But what will save the day amidst the disappearance of cookies? And this one is a multiple choice. We're going to throw this one up to the audience.
Cookie Monster is not an answer here.
Yeah, I know. Cookie Monster is like, right? Otis Spunkmeyer is not part of the. So now, walled gardens, right? Walled gardens, your Facebooks, your Googles, third-party data, first-party data, all of the above, right? Just take a minute or two there. And
hey, Vincent, I did notice when we get a chance, there's a great question from Dan Apollo around how we should think about people in this pandemic era working remotely, interoperating clearly as business people across desktop, mobile, our shopping content consumption behaviors as well. So although it didn't show up in the Q&A, we should definitely pull that in as we get a chance later.
That's thank you for that question, Dan. And yeah, so I think so. Why don't we let's get the results of the poll, and then let's tackle that question. Let's see. All right, first party data and all of the above, pretty close. That's a pretty close one there. But
yeah, so I think in my opinion, it's really all of the above. Mm-hmm. And obviously, as a third-party data company, we would have loved to see more people select all of the above.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But yeah, I think, look, I think for Stirista, cookies going away is actually something we are looking forward to. And part of the reason for that is a lot of our stuff and our graph is made out of 3 legs, which is our ESP, DSP, and site tags. So all of these things are allowing us to collect first party and second party data. And obviously we are in the third party data business. So we're aggregating all of these things together. And where it really differentiates us and gives us the ability, especially when you think about something as dynamic as an IP, is most of what you're seeing in the industry today is a lot of outdated data sets, especially when it comes to online identifiers. And part of it is a lot of companies hide behind privacy as the reason, right? But the problem is there's no real way to test a bunch of hashed maids, for example. So people are utilizing that sort of data sets, and they're being licensed for a lot of money back and forth between various companies. So the best advice that I have for companies is to help themselves by investing in building their own graphs themselves. And so what's going to save the day is really preparing now while there are still alternatives around. And especially in relation to the connected TV side of things, you're talking about something where people are using dynamic IP addresses, but it's hard to derive location, for example, from a TV device. Even if you're getting lat long, it's not very accurate. So then you need to be able to tie other devices that exist in that household that are geo-enabled in order to connect the whole thing to tie it back to an actual household. And all of this can only happen if you are getting data that you feel is reliable. And there is nothing as reliable as your own data. If you're a brand with your own app, or if you're almost any company that has its own website, being able to tag that website and capture traffic, all of those things should be the basis for creating your graph. And then you use third party as more of a reference file to tie those things together.
Thank you. So Chad, all of the above as well? Is that in your opinion?
Yeah, I think AJ brought up a couple of great points. I'll try to, build on some of those as well as highlight a few that I heard. First and foremost, a company should absolutely be focused, as we started off the session with, in creating their own identity graph. Now, that doesn't mean you have to build it yourself. The expertise it takes, the technology associated with it, as we said, the ability to fill in the gaps in your data through third-party data is foundational to your success in really understanding your customers. And you, of course, because you don't have every customer in the US, for example, being able to know and build from that with lookalike models of your next best customer with people, prospects who you don't know, is going to be foundational for your success as a marketer. The other thing that he brought out, which is not just that you should be focused on creating an identity graph and filling that with third-party data to fill in the holes that you have in it, is this concept, and Chester Dalzell also brought this up, second-party data. So the walled gardens are arguably very large entities, and there's new companies pivoting into that, for various reasons, because they control the data that is given to them by us as people, consumers, in the interaction. So Facebook controls the data we give Facebook. All of our likes, all of our names, all of our birthdays, all of our relationships, all of our networks. They own and control that data as a first party. Google, similar thing. When you sign up for the free services there, the Google emails that you provide, right? The videos you consume. You cannot anonymously consume video on YouTube, right? It's a fact. It's part of their terms and conditions. Any of the services, right? Google searches, etc. They map through their identity graph all of your interactions, whether you're logged in or not, deterministically when you're logged in, probabilistically when you're not, into their identity graph in order to run their business. Same thing with Netflix, right? Same thing with Apple. Same thing with Amazon. So These first parties control massive amounts of data. What you are seeing is for companies that don't get to collect data and don't have enough direct consumer interactions to build their own identity graphs, they are relying on some third parties, and there's some really great solutions out there for marketers clearly. So Walmart has a Walmart Media Exchange, WMX. They take all of the data and interactions they have as a first party, and they allow people to look into that data and or match their own data into it. And that first party data from a CPG company who doesn't have a direct interaction working with Walmart is an example of a second party data exchange that's occurring in there. So those things are valuable, and as Chester pointed out and as AJ pointed out, second party data exchanges will be important as these things go forward. But again, creating your own identity graph, number one, using third party data, not only to enhance your graph, but using third party service providers and their referential identity graphs to connect you between publishers and platforms, as AJ and Stirista does as an example. And then finally, of course, participating in second-party data exchanges are all methodologies that will overcome the historic reliance on and benefit that a third-party cookie had that will no longer be available to us in the next year and a half.
And I want to get to second-party data exchanges, as you pointed out, Chad, and Chester is was rooting for as well. Let's jump into that question though that you pointed out that Dan went rogue on us and threw it in the bets we love about you, Dan. So I'm going to go rogue, and I'm going to ask the panelists this question here. So with so many people working remotely in 2020, how should marketers be thinking about possible changes in desktop versus mobile shopping or content consumption behaviors? You want to take that one, Chad? Then we'll go over to AJ.
Absolutely. And so it is a great question. And many of the behaviors that we're seeing, in fact, are enabling companies who historically were data poor to become data rich. Just think about this. Down the street, there is a half a dozen restaurants and fast food chains that I never presented any of my information to besides a card swipe. And half the time I paid them with cash, and they literally know nothing about me. They just assume people within a certain geo range are the people who are buying food through their, coming into their restaurant and or going through their drive-thrus. Now today, I almost order exclusively via these apps. So, I'm logged into, these fast food restaurants apps. They know it's me. I'm making my order, that I'm ordering food for the whole family, because I know the convenience is now I can pull up, pick up my food either through a rapid drive-through or through a curbside pickup. And these companies who never had this rich information and data from consumers, now with the digital transformation and the change in our behavior due to the pandemic, is opening up this massive new opportunity that we as consumers, I'm always going to order ahead, but that's me personally. But I think a lot of people are going to maintain these habits that we created during the pandemic, and that's going to create this opportunity for more companies to have a direct interaction, DTC, go direct to consumer in their interactions and in the services and the value they create. So that's one behavior that we have to capitalize on as markets, is make it easier for people to interact with you, ensure that you can actually collect the necessary information to constantly improve your customer experiences. And then again, I'll kind of cue it up to AJ, because I know we work together as partners on this. But then as we talk about your business persona that we live in our houses now, and our consumer persona that we live in our houses now, the ability to market to us as people, whether we're in our consumer profile or a business profile, is becoming more important. And there are technological solutions that I'll cue up to AJ to talk about, and how, service providers like Stirista and what Acxiom's doing as well with our partner ecosystem and Dun & Bradstreet and Stirista are solving for this. So AJ, you want to maybe talk about how we continue to make those things a reality to address us as both business people and consumers?
Yeah, so I think, one of the fascinating things that's happening now is we're working on a couple of projects with Acxiom, for example, on email marketing side. And what we're seeing is sending out emails to people's business emails, even if it's a kind of in the middle of the road, it could be considered a more consumer offer. People are responding and opening and clicking on it. around the same rate as they were doing for consumer offers. So there's the difference in kind of what it used to be. People would open emails at certain times, personal email at certain times, work emails at certain times, has definitely gone away almost entirely, because everybody, for most part, is working from home. And that means the whole persona is blending in together. And then the other kind of fascinating thing that's happening because of it is also enhancing our ability to be able to link people to where they live. So it's one of the great unsolved mysteries of marketing, right? Is the ability to connect an executive back to their home address. And now that you can't get somebody's home address, or now that you can actually get home address, it's getting a whole lot easier to market. And one of the observations I made, and I still use Facebook, so I'm showing my age a little bit here because I know it's no longer cool to be using Facebook. But one of the things that's happening is Facebook has started using some sort of IP targeting to show ads now. And so it's a little bit awkward because I can actually see what my wife is searching for, so I know when a big purchase is coming. So, so you can kind of start seeing some of this blending happening. Some of it is good, other stuff is not so good, because now the other person knows what you're shopping for Christmas and all that, because the retargeting ads are not just account specific; they're becoming IP specific. So there's kind of a whole blending of things happening, and which is creating both an opportunity for marketers in being able to reach people. You'll start seeing a lot more B2B ads now happening on social channels, because again, people are not separating the hours of engagement they had with traditional channels. So I think that's a big difference than it used to be. It's also giving companies an opportunity to collect information, and that's a pandemic related thing. So I was forced to get a haircut today because otherwise I wouldn't hear the end of it at the office tomorrow, right? So yep. I went to a haircut chain, and it's not my big client, so I can't name it. Otherwise they'll think I was cheating on them. But they had me fill out this form, and the form I thought was great. It said, did I have COVID and all those things? And it asked me for my email address and name and phone number. But the bad thing in all this was they collected it in a piece of paper that'll end up in some folder or trash at some point. But so there's another question, how do you start building a consumer ID graph? Well, if they had just created a simple app or one-page web form and had me do that on the spot right then and there, they would have collected my information. But as it turns out, they have nothing about me. If they're tracking devices, they might know that my device went in there. But I would say that was a missed opportunity. But I thought it was pretty clever in how they collected that information. And there are restaurants in places like Washington I've read about where they've started collecting that information just in case somebody does get COVID, they can reach back out to everybody. So there are definitely opportunities to build a graph now in traditional establishments where people would feel odd about giving up their email. Today, they don't feel odd for the rare occasion that you do go in. So.
That's a great point. I'd like to point out as well and build on that a little bit, because I love the story, Ajay, and understanding the existing requirements of new compliance measures in the U.S. California Consumer Privacy Act, which became the regulation, which is enhancing the rights that California citizens have. Virginia's kicking one off. Of course, there's one starting up in D.C. There's other states. There's biometric laws, and proactive consent has to exist for collection of biometric information in the state of Illinois for their citizens. So, and in context of GDPR, as an example, you cannot proactively assume something in the collection of the data, and pre-check mark a box, so to speak, that the data can be used for multiple purposes. And so, what is interesting to Ajay's point, right? A small transformation, whether you had an iPad, if someone's like, I'm not comfortable touching your iPad to fill out this information to create a collection. They could have said, that's okay, just go to this link and then you can fill it out on your phone while you're standing here. It'll immediately get sent to our location because, again, they know where you're standing, or you can give them your store location as an example if they ask for that. And then there could be a little consent form right there. You know, pre-checked in the US is still allowed, but not checked, but available. We can use this information for marketing purposes, right? So those little things are fundamental building blocks to the actual building of the information, the data, which is actually even more important than the technology that would go into the identity graph that you'd build.
And I love the examples, because B2B marketers that we've talked to over the years, either as clients or on our podcast that Ajay and I host, they've always been talking about making B2B marketing more personal. And I think that this 2020 has sped up that process. It's also sped up that process, as you talked about, Chad, as far as digital transformation. And you really see it in the restaurant world. In New York City here, restaurants that would never deliver to you. They're like, oh, what are you, crazy? You know, Cat's Deli, there's a line around the corner. They're delivering now. And they're also starting their own websites to capture that information, because some of the other sites that you talked about, Chad, whether it's a Seamless or a Grubhub, they are, they charge fees on top of that. That is sometimes hurting that bottom line for them, but they've been able to adapt. So we've been seeing a lot of digital transformation, a lot of personalization as it comes to B2B marketing during this time. But let's get back.
I would say the within that, like you said, I mean, and I personally, to be clear, I don't even use Grubhub or Uber Eats or any of that. Like I said, I'm using either mobile apps from these large scale commercial chains around the world, right? Global franchisees, or even many of our local restaurants. You'll either call up the phone or give them the information, or you will use a third-party app to collect the information or present their menu. But through the pickup, they should be getting all that info, so it's great.
Yeah, exactly right. We've heard many marketers talk about that. And let's get back to that second party. It's something you don't hear often about, right? You hear first party, you hear third party. Let's talk about those second party data exchanges and why those are important. I'll go to you, Chad.
Okay, well, thank you. So, in our business, in the last 12 to 16 months, we've processed over about 1 trillion records in second-party data exchanges across about 45 separate relationships. And again, a second-party data exchanges are when two companies, so for example, historically, one of the primary use cases was an airline or a hotel chain or other travel and entertainment businesses have co-branded credit cards. So they have to, and they want to share data between the information the hotel chain or the airline has about you and the rewards program and the credit card issuer. And for privacy reasons and for expediting matches and enhancements of use cases, they use a company like Acxiom or Stirista, and we manage the data for them, and we ensure that neither company sees each other's data. We connect that data. We use the consent frameworks, basically the opt-outs and the use cases that were permissioned for each individual on those files, and we respect that across the two companies. And then we create basically a combined list for marketing purposes so that we can do a co-marketing campaign. And again, co-marketing campaigns, and then again, measurement, as I talked about earlier with like the Walmart exchange or Target Reds exchange, or what's coming online now with CVS and others. The ability to take your data to give you insight to measurement and media performance, or again, reach specific audiences based upon data you may not have access to, are the primary use cases of second-party data exchanges and use cases.
Thank you for that clarification there. Ajay, same question.
Yeah, and I think Acxiom, by virtue of being with IPG and with Stirista, owning a DSP and ESP, we're sort of in a unique position where we are generating a lot of second-party exhaust data that other companies don't have access to. And I think when you start aggregating data at that level and being able to share across companies' second-party data, it really helps fill in the blanks that would, in a combined effort, helps companies like Stirista and Acxiom be more competitive with the walled gardens that obviously have direct access to that sort of data set. And so over time, we can build similar scale and similar behavior tracking that the walled gardens have been able to do so successfully that individually companies are not able to do. But with the ability to really integrate data sets, and this is where identity comes in handy, is being able to link Stirista and Acxiom data sets and other third-party, second-party data sets together, really can create something that is robust and really can democratize the exchange of ideas and marketing information that is become kind of controlled in the hands of a few players who are trying to hold on to it, and some of the things that are happening, like cookies going away and all of those things, are a result of a handful of larger companies trying to control that flow of information.
Yeah, I like that last point, Ajay, if I can, and happy to share the link post webinar here today. My boss, Arun Kumar, who's the Chief Data and Marketing Technology Officer of IPG, just wrote a piece that he shared out in the industry about this specific issue, right? And where we are with regulators and the unintended consequences that occur if you make certain decisions and put the control or the power in the hands of only a few companies, and therefore disenfranchise literally millions of other companies because of either the hurdle you have to get over or the expense to continue to manage data and information on behalf of consumers. So definitely we'll share that afterwards.
Thank you, for sure. And just a couple questions that I have, just wanted to come back to as we were having some conversations. I've jotted some down there. Connected TV. You've been hearing about it a lot lately. It's been there, right? But you're hearing about it more now that people are at home. They're binge watching. I mean, every week I feel like I'm talking to someone about what show they're binge watching. And did you see that one where this one killed that one? I'm like, why is everyone a murder show? Like, what's happening? But talk to us about what each of your organizations are doing in like that kind of the connected TV space, or just kind of about the rise of it, if you will. I even see it in the B2B space now. Let's go to Ajay first.
All I have to say is Carol Baskin did it.
Right. That was like the first one, right? Tiger King was really the first one at the height of the pandemic that came out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Our next poll question, no kidding.
That would have been a fun one.
Yeah.
So yeah, for connected TV, I think because we're all, again, working from home and sort of mingling our lives together now, it is becoming much more relevant to be able to serve personalized ads, and easier to do so as well. And this is the first time we have the ability really to not just have that crazy local car dealership just blasting the ad, but really have something relevant. If I'm looking for something and then suddenly an ad pops up, that's kind of, it freaks people out a little bit the first time. But I think for a marketer, it's a gold mine of information. Essentially, if somebody is say looking to buy a new phone, and if Verizon can place an ad while somebody is watching a show on Hulu, that's just brilliant to me, right? And it's still evolving. I think part of the big challenge is that people don't have an easy way of most people don't have enough scale on the connected TV ID side. So that's one of the things that even the large onboarding companies are struggling with, is being able to provide enough scale for this type of ad to be meaningful, because there is a barrier to entry. Connected TV on the media side is more expensive. There's also production costs involved. But as we evolve, it's really going to be for B2B. Somebody could spend $10,000 a month and really keep hitting Chad with third-party data ads that he should acquire. And that's kind of the beauty and brilliance of this is you can't skip these ads. You're stuck with these ads. And if you can connect those CTV IDs to household or to generally it's household level, that's where we're working off of. But that's kind of the thing is connecting those IDs. That's where most people are struggling with. And that's what we have been focusing on. And I personally didn't know a whole lot about CTV until we bought a DSP that specialized in CTV. So it's been a learning experience for me as well. But whoever kind of conquers that space of being able to at scale connect these devices and apps that are CTV down to households is going to be in a pretty good shape in this kind of CTV world that's coming up for the next few years.
Any comments on that, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, we could probably spend a whole hour on connected TV alone. Exciting space. I mean, our friends over at Roku, right? One of the leading providers of not just the device itself, but the underlying technology that's actually sitting in multiple TV, smart TV providers systems are solving just for this problem. And there's a great question here by Dan Apollo, right, on what are some of the differences in IDs that the consumer is sharing when they watch a connected TV versus watching over traditional cable line or house or app in their home or network. And so, cutting the cord has always kind of been around removing your dependency on cable TV provider and going to an app provider. But as you see now, many of those cable TV providers are also the same providers who are providing your internet service. Therefore, they're still getting line of sight to some of these connections. But as Ajay pointed out, TV marketing in general, even in a connected TV space, is generally considered at the household level. So the device is either associated with the point of location, which would be a physical address, or of course a name on the actual license billing service itself. That's usually held by Roku directly, as an example, or as you pointed out, Hulu or Apple TV or others. They have the subscriber information. They have the general information about the IP address and of course the location of the consumption associated with the credit card transaction, and they own that as a first party. And they usually represent that up. Like I said, in my household, there's 3 individuals who live here consistently, but there's probably half a dozen people because I have 4 total kids and significant others and relatives. There's a lot of people consuming TV at my household, and so household level information is what's used. A lot of hashed email addresses are used to match into the individual and or to map that to a household and represent the dynamics of that. The third-party data that's needed to describe that household are some of the things that are used in that space. So it's a great area. I think it's most exciting because billions and billions of dollars in media are served in what's called above the line, so non-addressable media, or media that's basically served on very small panels that have been age and gender and demo based. And so when we really want to, again, as a marketer, be effective, we actually want to know who we're marketing to at the most, at the best level of granularity for our product or service or need. Making that inventory that historically was non-addressable or above the line into addressable media below the line creates those efficiencies we started the webinar off on. And that's why it's so important to businesses. It's so important to solve, and why so many companies are racing to the connected TV or the smart TV ecosystem. And it's important for us as marketers because it makes us more efficient, right? Reaching people who actually care about the products or services that we want to engage them with.
One of the cooler things that happened was, I guess we're running some connected TV ads ourselves, and my 7-year-old saw an ad that had my photo at some point, and he came running saying I was on TV. So that felt pretty good. So.
Sign that kid up. He's a lead. That's a lead right there.
Lead.
I love it. Well, I want to go to some Q&A. Now the Q&A is really blowing up there. And thank you, Dan, for using the Q&A. I know Dan personally, that's why I'm messing with him. I know, So let's talk about why do you guys use the term graph for all this? I don't see the connection with graph, paper or XY axis graphs. Like, explain? This is one of the questions.
Yeah, happy to start that one off and go to AJ. Ruth, great question, and thank you for asking that. In general, as we know, marketers, the information we collect historically have been put into rows and columns, right? SQL-based databases. And then we do lookups, right? We have people or businesses, across the x-axis, and then we fill in on the y-axis as much information as we can collect. As we talked about, names, addresses, location, IP, right? Business type, SIC codes, all those type of things. And when you talk about our earlier conversation, when you were actually trying to do identity resolution, the best technology to do identity resolution with is a technology called graph theory. And graph theory actually is a set of technologies that looks at the relationship between entities and what they call edges and nodes. And with that, they look for edges and nodes that have higher affinity or lower affinity. And from that, they pull together the information using machine learning and now more and more artificial intelligence to actually identify the non-intuitive relationships that exist in data sets. And so if you're really, all the big businesses, Apple, Facebook, Google, Amazon, Netflix, they are anchoring these not in SQL databases. They're operationally using SQL databases, but those SQL type databases are being created from graphs that look at all of the data coming together and create the relationships and the normalization of that information. So excellent question. And again, a very tech dweeby thing that's happening behind the scenes, but is critical when you evaluate what type of identity solution you're going to get and what access do you actually have to all the information and the keys that are created from that at the individual household, location or business level from your solution.
And let me just add, there's another question about identity graphs. AJ, let's go to you on that. But Joe Ferguelli, he asks, has a number of great points here, but to piggyback that identity graph, what are some of the difference? All the contact list contact has resurrected the QR code for menus, schedules, web forms. I'm guessing these can add to the identity graphs as well.
At least all of the QR codes I've seen are just simply taking a photo, and it's not giving any information necessarily back to the restaurants. So could it? Yes, but the way most restaurants are doing it right now, I don't see how they would collect that information. But I do think restaurants, especially the large chains, are missing out an opportunity to collect customer data. As Chad said, with a couple of boxes, they could really be complying with CCPA and GDPR and getting a lot of valuable information, both in terms of actually the information, but similar to CTV, where you're tracking consumption, you could actually start tracking behavior in terms of what people are ordering and those type of things if you develop something that is slightly more sophisticated than what's being used in most restaurants.
Yeah, exactly. The QR code today is the primary redirect to usually a web URL. I will say there's a really interesting company out there called Trusana, and they do passwordless authentication. So after they verify an identity, they really make seamless authentication into an ecosystem possible. And they do have a proprietary QR code that fundamentally creates the identity verification process to begin and use biometric, your fingerprint or your facial ID. So there's some new variants on it that kick off a process, but to the specific question, the QR code itself, as an example, is not what's usually stored in association with your identity.
Got it. And thank you for that question, Joe. And then Joe is peppering in some beautiful facts here on the Q&A. Thank you, Joe, about AT&T carves out pay TV business and deal with TPG. The sell stake in pay TV unit to private equity firm TPG. Is that something that you guys are familiar with there?
I mean, in general, AJ started to highlight it, which is in order for any of the big providers to maintain their, whether you want to consider it an app like Disney Plus, right, or Peacock that's coming out, or Netflix or others, you fundamentally have to have unique content. Well, as AJ pointed out, the creation of content is extremely expensive because for every big show that is a success, there are usually 3 or 5 shows that are not a success. And even the cost of production and the time it takes. And so there are big monopolies out there who are buying up rights to content. Hence, Disney has a huge catalog. Disney's actually about 150 different companies. They bought Marvel. They bought the Star Wars franchise. They own Pixar. You will see Disney taking back all of the rights for that content so that the only way you can get access to it is through Disney Plus, as those contracts where those companies historically licensed it out to others like Amazon and Netflix. And so it will be a war on content. They also own ESPN, right? So all the sports archive rights they have. So it's going to be interesting, right? But if the app or the connected TV provider does not have the content you want, the likelihood you're going to continue to pay a subscription month after month will be very low. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens, as has been pointed out here.
And I'll add to that a little bit is, people started cutting their cable pretty aggressively in the last couple of years. And I don't think anybody quite realized that and you're not just going to pay $12 to Netflix, you're going to pay $5 to Discovery, $20 to MGM. So it's just starting to add up quite a bit. And so we expect there to be a lot of consolidation in the space. And also similar to data exchanges, there's going to be exchanges or consortiums being built with some of the smaller apps. So we work with quite a few of these type of companies, and a lot of them are struggling to add subscriber base in a rapid clip. So the only way they're going to survive, even if they don't physically merge companies, is to merge programming where, say, individually you would have to pay $100 total, but maybe you get 5 different smaller Netflix-like places for $50 and they split the profit.
Yeah, it's like carriage fees all over again.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot of that. Yeah, like I said, it's even in music, right? I feel like there's 1 minute I'm listening to a song for free. My son wants to play it 7 times, and then the week later I asked for that same song. It's like, oh, this is only available now through and $3.99 a month, and I'm like, what? You're on to me. You're on to me.
That's kind of like Ben's question here. What data collection opportunities exist?
Exactly.
They're collecting data about everything. How many times you consume a piece of music, what type of music is being consumed, what are you actually asking Alexa to do, how long you actually scroll, and at what speed across your feeds on every social media site.
Exactly. You read my mind, Chad. I feel like we've been doing this for a long time, you and I, so we get each other there. So Benjamin's question for the audience here, and thank you for the question, Benjamin. What data collection opportunities, if any, have been pursued in alternate media such as VR? What unique identity metrics or dimensions can be gleaned from it? Do you want to continue that? If you want to go with that, AJ, and then come back to
This seems like
Chad?
a Chad question. Right. It requires a PhD in data.
Yeah.
No, I mean, truthfully, it is interesting, and it is one of the questions as a society we have to answer. So you can get a facial recognition algorithm and inject it as part of any solution you build on AWS. And again, you have to realize that if you, without consent, collect somebody's biometric profile when they enter your store, or they drive down the street, or you provide a service such as a photo recognition service, you can and will get a lawsuit from people within the state of Illinois, and millions of dollars are being sent out as fines, as an example, around that data collection without consent that's happening because of the variation in law. We also think, any amount of data that can be collected is going to be collected. Again, as I said, how you actually interact, what parts of the store are you actually in? If they, through a mobile signal, as AJ talked about, and the fact that I have my Kroger app going, Kroger could. I'm not saying they do this today, but Kroger with short-range beacons within their store could understand the path I take in their store. And they could realize that, you know, a majority of the aisles within the center of the store, Chad and his family never go down. We hit fresh foods, PODAs. We kind of get some of the pastas. We go back out to the proteins. We hit the beer section and wine section on the way out, maybe the deli. And there are huge swaths of the store we don't buy products from them for. And so their question is, okay, do we stop advertising certain products to Chad because we know he consistently does not go through that part of our store, does not consume those, because we can see it through his loyalty plan of what he's actually purchasing because he's getting his gas points and things like that. And do they want to try to incent me to go down those aisles with different coupons or other things by second-party data with co-op with a vendor, you know, free trial of a product that I may have never bought from the store before, working second-party data between their partners or not. But I mean, it is unlimited, but again, it has to be done in a way that we call, you know, fair, which is the information that is being collected about us as people, you know, and even though we're in this business, should be transparent, right? It should be easily understood what data is collecting. What is the use that we're allowing it to be used for? Can we get access to it to change, update, correct, delete, or suppress it? And do we have a high level of confidence that that data is securely being managed? And I think if we follow those principles and we really push as an industry, both as brands and as suppliers and technology and data providers in this industry, to do those things, then as people, I think we'll all be comfortable with the data that's being collected. We will enjoy the benefits of the experiences that are created through the effective use of data, and we'll have a balanced ecosystem.
I love it. And just you said a final thought there, Ajay, as we wrap up here.
Yeah, no, I think Chad summarizes things so beautifully. It's hard to add thoughts, but you know, Acxiom's commitment to ethically sourced data is something that we can all admire and look up to, and that's one of the reasons why we have been good friends and partners as companies for a long time as well. And the only thing I'll add to Chad's thoughts is there's a lot of companies, and it comes back to kind of building your own ID graph, is there's a lot of great ideas, but a lot of things fall apart in just operationally at store levels, for example, right? So if you are going to Safeway, if you don't have a card, they want you to fill out the address, but the reality is the cashier is not going to hold up the line. So they give you a card and you end up with a card, or they take a random card and they swipe your purchase habits. So a lot of good ideas get lost because operationally it's not feasible. So I think a greater collaboration between kind of the agency, data company, and the operational locations, groups, departments in the companies will go a long way in making a lot of these things realities. And I think there's work to be done, obviously, on the graph side, from the on the data side, because data is not perfect by any means. And luckily, we're not brain surgeons, so we can get the email address wrong and nothing too bad happens. But I think we're all striving for better data and better connections. But I think it's a collaborative group effort between multiple departments and functions in order to make this graph become a reality. Because no matter what Chad and I dream up, if it's falling apart at the store location, or a store owner is going rogue and collecting information on pieces of paper, the whole thing just kind of falls apart. So
I appreciate that. And thank you again. As Ajay, you're right. When Chad explains things, he breaks it down like a really cool professor. Chad, that's awesome. And I learn from Ajay every day. I'm fortunate there. So thank you, everyone. Thank you. It's Chad Engelgau, ladies and gentlemen, the Chief Executive Officer of Acxiom. Ajay Gupta, the Chief Executive Officer and founder of Stirista. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your time. We really do appreciate it here at the Direct Marketing Club of New York. With that, I'm going to bring it back to our president, Ginger Conlon, with some final thoughts and some of our upcoming events. I've been your host, Vincent Pietrafesa. Thank you.
Awesome. That was so fantastic. thank you so much, Vincent, Chad, and AJ. Yes, great information, and so, really learned a lot today too. So thank you again. And I want to thank everyone for joining us and let you know we have some other fun stuff coming up. So be sure to come back. Next week, we're going to be talking about techniques to elevate your virtual meetings. And that's internal meetings, external meetings, pitches, the whole deal. So definitely show up for that on March 3rd. On March 24th, we're going to get personal with personal branding strategies, a little bit different than just the meetings. We're going to go talk about your digital presence and a lot more. That's going to be so fun. We just had a pre-call about that, and it was that was enlightening. And then April 8th is the wine tasting. Be sure to sign up by March 15th so you can get your wine. That is going to be a fun evening. And with that, thanks again, everyone, and have a great rest of your night.
Thank you all.
Good
All right,
evening.
thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.